Good day, everyone, and welcome back to our Executive Intelligence webinar series. Over the past few weeks, we focused on visibility and how better information leads to better business decision. Today, we're taking that conversation into cybersecurity for our title is deliberately bold. Your company has already been targeted. You just don't know it yet. That doesn't mean everyone here has been breached. It means businesses are constantly being tested through emails, credentials, devices, cloud application, and other digital entry points. So today, instead of asking, could we be targeted? We're asking, would we recognize the warning signs if someone were already trying? Joining me today, we have a few faces that you may be familiar with from our podcast and previous webinar, Feroz Hanif, who's bringing the CEO perspective, and Rafiq, who is going to be bringing the cybersecurity technical side. So I'll be providing or guiding the conversation as we connect cybersecurity means technically and how this affects the business as well. So before we jump in, I do want to ask a question out there, just so we can get used to the interactive feel of the moment, because this is an interactive webinar. Go ahead and drop in the chat when you hear the word cyber attack. What comes to mind? It can be anywhere from ransomware, phishing, hacking, data theft, or something else. What comes to mind? I'm going to give you a minute to send that in the chat for me. Cyber attack. What comes to mind? All right, so while you go ahead and drop that into the chat, let me start off by setting the scene for you. I'm seeing a response. I'm seeing someone says that what comes to mind is a company may be destroyed. That's interesting. So we may be able to show that context or how we can save that company before it reaches that point. But let's jump in here. So I'm going to set some tone for you here. So imagine cyber attacks are dramatic. System shut down, screen locks, alarm goes off. But reality can be quieter. A password is stolen, an inbox is accessed, a forward rule changes. Someone starts observing organization while everything continues working as normal. And that quiet period can be more dangerous than the dramatic part. So, Rafiq, if an attacker has gained access but wants to remain unnoticed, what could actually be happening behind the scenes?
Gary, that is usually when the attacker starts learning about the organization. They may use a real employee's username, password, which allows them to appear like a legitimate user rather than an obvious attacker. So once inside, they may quietly read emails, study communication patterns, and identify important people, and such as executive, finance employees, suppliers, and system administrators. So they may also observe how payments are approved, which applications the employee uses, and what company information their account can access. For example, an attacker remain inside an employee's mailbox and watch conversation between finance and supplier. And on the same end, once they understand how the company communicates and when payments normally happen. So they may send a fraudulent request that appears completely genuine. So the dangerous part is that nothing needs to stop working. The employee can continue using the account while the attacker is also using it quietly. So abnormal activity through a legitimate account can be much harder to identify than obvious malware. So that is why normal business operations do not always mean the organization is safe.
Mm. So basically, you're saying that the absence of disruption doesn't normally mean the absence of risk. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So let's take a look here at what an invisible hack can move through the different stages. You kind of gave a a little bit of insight to this, Rafiq, but let's take a deeper look into this. So first we notice that there's the lore, and that's like something convincing reaches an employee. So as you mentioned, the email coming to the inbox, right? And a lot of them do have like urgent text saying urgent, open now, something like that. And then we would move on to what is called the foothold. So credentials are accessed, are compromised, and then we have the expansion. And this is where the attacker begins exploring emails, cloud application, endpoints, and data. Then comes the impact, which is the fraud, the data theft, ransomware, disruptions, or reputational damage. So as you mentioned, it looks normal. The attack happened, but it has the different stages, and most of what we see is the final stage. So, Rafiq, what might tell us something unusual in developing like these stages?
There are several small warning signs we would look for. So it could be a login from an unusual country, device accessing the account, or authentication activity at a time when the employee does not normally work. So we may also see a new inbox forwarding rule, unusual file downloads, access to information outside the employee's normal role, or repeated alerts coming from their laptops. One of these events by itself may have an innocent explanation. An employee could be traveling or using a new device. But what if the user logs in from an unusual location, creates a forwarding rule, downloads larger amount of data, and then generates an endpoint alert? Those events begins telling one story. That is why context is so important. The you know the earlier we connect those warning signs, the more opportunities we have to the disable account, isolate the device, and stop the tracker before the incident reaches to the final stages.
Right. You mentioned a lot about seeing insight and visibility based on what I'm seeing. And we know that some of these areas are often the blind side in an organization, and they deserve a little bit more attention than you think. So from credentials, attacker would normally go for that. So that's where they don't have the information, they just try to get the simple login. Um, and then you mentioned endpoints. So your laptops, your mobile devices have become part of that security perimeter as well, and your cloud applications. So what makes these risks difficult on a normal business activity? Like first, can you give me some insights about this, like the visibility portion?
Look, first of all, thank you, Kane, for having me with you today, this morning. Um, it's a great conversation. I think, once again, cybersecurity, just to frame this, has been looked at mostly through the lens of a technical setup. And when I look at some of this from a leadership perspective, you know, this is risk management, if nothing else. And when we look at compromised credentials, can you imagine, a CEO whose email address has been impersonated, right? And random messages maybe going out to prospective customers, existing customers, suppliers, right? Even other leaders in the organization, and cause chaos, right? So when we talk about compromised credentials, most people think about, in the old school days, it used to be, I want to make sure my password is protected, right? But gone are those days. We have to be very careful about phishing emails. Now you can even have text messages where they actually take you to a website and have you log in, and those credentials are stolen, right? And so the security posture has to be in place to not only prevent that, right, but also if something happens, to be able to recoup from that attack very, very quickly, right? When we talk about endpoint risk, yeah, we should have our malware on our devices, right? Um, but it goes further than that. As I said, nowadays you can have a text message that takes you into a malicious website, right? And so you have to have the right protection in place on your devices, far more advanced than the old school antivirus. And then, from a cloud perspective, uh, because we're living in this age of AI and agentic AI, this is much more critical than ever before. A lot of people don't even realize that they may be using a cloud application. Like, I'll give you an example: Gmail, Outlook, right? And people use it on a personal basis as well as in their companies. And
Right.
to them, it's just from a browser, um, right? But what will happen is behind the scenes, it's actually in the cloud infrastructure somewhere, right? And it may not even be on the premises of the company that you work for, and you would not even know that, right? And so you have to be very careful about how you use any application these days, right? And making sure that you don't accidentally give permissions, especially if you're sharing files, folders, or even giving access through a third-party software. Give an example: if your company has Canva and you log in through your company account, you want to make sure that it's actually the Canva site and not a impersonator's site, right? Very, very easy to detect that. But these are some of the things that I think most CEOs are concerned about, and it's keeping us awake at night because we have to have the right technology, tools, processes, and training in place. Um, Otherwise, this is a huge risk for the organization. So that's my
Yeah.
2 cents on it.
Yeah, and you mentioned quite a few points that would lead up to what we're about to discuss, which is what that impact looks like. And I want to talk on the financial side of it a bit and bring in that conversation not only to the panel but also to the audience. If you can, from your organization environment, what would be the greatest impact to your business this quarter if you had a cyber attack? That invisible threat. So Feroz, give me a little bit more perspective of that financial impact that you may see happening. As you mentioned, CEOs are waiting up at night because of these potential risks. How does this unfold?
Let me kind of hit on the compromised executive account for a second and kind of tie into what Rafiq had said a few minutes ago.
Mhm.
Imagine that the chief financial officer's email address has been hacked and is being impersonated. And an email goes out to one of the suppliers with a link for requesting a payment for $1 million. Now, to the receiving end, to the receiver of that email, if they're not careful, they may actually make a payment of $1 million. And all of a sudden, that's a huge financial impact, right? And who's liable for that? And you ask the question, who's liable for that? Is it the CFO who somehow got his account hacked?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it the receiving party who could not detect that that email was being impersonated, right?
Right.
And so it leads to a lot of mistrust, even if the transaction is reversed. There is mistrust on both sides, right? um, I think that's the biggest concern, the financial impact to the organization from a leadership perspective, right?
Mhm.
And even if small things like a remote endpoint is breached, and I think once again Rafiq talked about it, where a virus crawls through your network and is starting to collect information, right? And gets to the point where it starts shutting down some of your mission critical systems. That is a huge financial loss for the company as your business process kind of starts to halt slowly as most of these business systems are not available, right? Um, at that moment, there's panic, there's chaos, and your normal business operations completely shuts down, right? The leadership, instead of thinking about the strategic objectives of the company and the growth plan all of a sudden shifts its mindset towards disaster recovery, right? Huge, significant impact, financial impact on the company. One of the things that you talk about over here is misconfigured cloud databases. This is company's data, especially if it's on the cloud, right? It has to be protected because, as you know, there are multi-tenants in the cloud. And if by accident one of your competitor gets access to your company information, you just lost your competitive advantage, right? So, and I think we talked briefly about the business email compromise. Again, once again, this doesn't have to be just at the executive CEO level. It's down to the individual people's level. And Rafiq gave an example as well, where somebody from accounts management whose email account may get hacked, um, and a invoice may go out. It could bring back a virus. It could then shut down the entire financial management system, right? So every aspect of cybersecurity, in my opinion, has a huge financial risk at the end. Right? Hopefully, that gives you a little bit of.
Yes, most definitely. And as you can see, based on the responses, not any of the answer. There's no right or wrong. It's just really what your environment will be able to, or how it will be affected once that attack starts. So I'm gonna give a list of sequence here, and I'm gonna ask Rafi to jump in to basically connect the dots for me. So for you in the audience, I want you to imagine this sequence: 2 a.m. unusual login. 2:08 a.m. a forwarded rule is created. 2:20 an unusual files are accessed. Then an endpoint alert appears. 4 different alerts or one developing attack. Can you connect the dots for me here, Rafiq? What's going on?
Uh, the first step is to look for a connection, like between the events, and then they are relatable to the same employee, account, device, or location. Then did they happen close together, or is the activity normal for the particular user? Then, for example, imagine an account logs in from an unusual country, as you said, 2 a.m. A few minutes later, a new forwarding rule is created. After the same account starts downloading files it doesn't normally access, and then the employee's laptop generate an alert. So separately, each system may allow only one small event. But when we connect the identity, email, cloud, data, and endpoint activity, we can see a possible attack developing. It's the developing phase of an attack. Then the goal is not simply to collect more alerts. Analysts need to context and prioritization so they can identify which alert require immediate investigation. Let me give you an example. I can share a client example without naming the organization or revealing the confidential details. So one organization we worked with believed it was well protected because it already had an antivirus, a firewall, and email security, and other controls too. When we reviewed its environment, the main issue wasn't that it had no protection. The issue was that information was separate across different tools, and there was no clear process for connecting it. A suspicious login could appear in one system, and an endpoint alert is another system. So cloud activity somewhere else.
Mhm.
Each event might be visible, but nobody had the complete picture. This wasn't about discovering that the client had already suffered a major breach. It was about identify a readiness gap before an incident occurred. So the assessment helped the organization prioritize, identify identity protection, endpoint visibility, alert ownership, and its incident response process. The main lesson for leadership was very simple. Owning security tools and having useful security visibility are not always the same thing.
So you're saying that companies could actually have a lot of security tools, but the visibility still might be poor.
Yeah, absolutely. They
Interesting.
have only noise alerts because of those tools. Maybe in some cases they are false positive.
Mhm. So I'm seeing some questions in the chat here, Rafik, and I just wanted to throw them out for you. I see someone asking how many times does a cyber security attack happens?
How many times it can happen? We always have to ready. It can happen anytime, in any situation. Having more tool does not automatically create better security. If every tool has its own dashboard and produce separate alerts, the security may spend most of its times reviewing noise rather than investigating the events. uh, and important warnings can be missed because they are buried under the duplicate alerts and false positives. Good visibility means understanding what the alerts are telling you together. So we always have to ready for the risk and attacks. We have to be more proactive.
Okay. And Feroz, in your experience, what have you seen in your area? Like what's happening?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, right? A lot of people think that, hey, I'm not impacted by it. I don't see it. But the reality is that millions, I said millions of cyber security attacks happen every second, every hour. We just don't see it. To give you some stats, right? Um, a major cloud security provider uh, has published this data that there are about 230 billion, with a B, billion attacks that happen across networks around the world every day. 230 billion attacks, right? And companies like Microsoft detect more than 600 million hostile signals and identity-based attacks daily. 600 million hostile signals and identity-based attacks, right? And so these are larger companies, so you can imagine, yeah, more people are trying to penetrate their networks. That way, they get,
Right.
more damage done. And we've seen that when we've had, I won't name some of the larger companies, but we've seen the internet kind of go down in parts of the world, right?
Mhm.
And that's how it happens. So yeah, this is something that a lot of people think, maybe it'll never happen to me, right? Why would it happen to me? I'm such a small company. But it happens all the time.
Yes, and that will bring me over to my next point here. We normally see where cybersecurity is left up to the IT department, but for us from a CEO chair, when does cybersecurity becomes a business continuity and leadership issue? Because as you mentioned, small businesses may be saying, "Why would someone attack my company? I'm so small."
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, small companies are more vulnerable than the larger companies. In fact, most cyber criminals these days, what they do is they will try to penetrate through the small companies who are suppliers to larger companies. Now, imagine this, right, for a second, that there's a large hospital system, and the hospital system, gives out its contracts for uh, for equipment repairs, or for laundry, for their scrubs, right? And those are small businesses. Typically these are small businesses within the minority communities. And what happens is that the cyber criminals first identify the uh, contracting parties, small vendors, penetrate their network to then get to the larger networks.
Mm.
And so a lot of times companies will say, hey, I'm just a small 2-person, 3-person, 10 people company. I'm so small. What is a cyber criminal going to gain out of it, right? And it
Mhm.
may not be you. It may be who you are working with, who you have a contract with. And so from a business continuity perspective, imagine that small business who gets attacked, does not even know that they are being attacked. And through that company, the hospital system gets attacked. When you talk about survival, that hospital system is not going to uh, work with that small vendor anymore until and unless they kind of prove that they have um, secured their networks and their computer systems, right?
Right.
And so during that time frame, a lot of small companies are not even able to survive.
Mhm.
They get penalized. Their contracts have some severe penalties in place for cybersecurity. They may not even know it's in the fine prints. So when you say, a survival strategy, I think once again, cybersecurity is a must, right? Because a business these days cannot survive without cybersecurity.
Yeah. And it sounds like cybersecurity is really just business resilience altogether and building that armor that will protect your business. So, on protecting your business, I'm going to throw this out to the audience and also our panel just to see if they can spot um the attacks here or the minor threats. So let's test it out a bit. So on the screen is what appears to be a normal vendor payment update. So imagine receiving this during a busy work day, not during a cybersecurity webinar like now, but you're between meetings, finance is processing emails, and a supplier is familiar. You have 15 seconds. What, if anything, would make you pause and say, this looks strange, if anything at all? If anybody on the panel knows, you can go ahead and let me know. I have the answer in the next slide, but let me know what you think.
Yeah, I think carry on this one, first and foremost is making sure that the email address from which a sensitive email like this is being received is authentic, right? When someone is trying to have you do something in a rush, 15 seconds, 2 hours, right? Whatever, and they want to have this done right away, right? I would always almost caution. I would say make sure you look at the from on your email to make sure that it's coming from your supplier, your vendor, or an authentic source.
That is indeed correct. And Rafiq, you want to go ahead and let us know what are some of the areas within this email that would allow you as the cybersecurity analyst to pause and say that's not right?
I am totally agree with Feroz. So the first thing I would check is the sender's email address, and the display name may look correct, but the actual domain could contain a small character change. For example, a zero instead of the letter O. These changes can be very difficult to notice during a busy working day. And the second warning is urgency. The message is trying to pressure the employee into acting quickly. So, the third concern is the unexpected change to banking details. Any request to send money to a new account should be treated carefully, especially when the sender is also asking employee to bypass or speed up a normal approval process. So the important point is that this type of business email compromise may not contain malware, a dangerous attachment, or even a malicious link. The tracker is targeting trust and the company's payment process. The safest response is to first of all, verify the request through a separate channel. Call the supplier using a phone number already stored in your records, or not a number included in the suspicious email, and confirm the change before processing the payment.
So basically, you're saying that's because those are correct. And as you can see, the points here, we had three major or four areas that would make you pause. So technically, someone could lose money here without even downloading a malware or clicking a malicious link.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the attacker may only need the employee to believe the message and follow the instruction.
Mm,
Basically, it's called social engineering, and no malware is required if the employee voluntarily changes the payment details and transfer the money. That is why financial verification process and employees awareness are just as important as technical security controls.
wow, so it sounds more much like we're not just hacking technology, but also the decision that someone on the other end would make by building that trust or relying a lot on the trust there. So let's look at the what leadership would bring into this picture here, Feroz. If this request appeared to come from you, right? What should the employee feel comfortable stopping the transaction or requesting or questioning it?
I think first and foremost, I would expect that someone would actually pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I've received this email. Is it
Mhm.
accurate?" Right? Most of the times, those relationships have a account manager, and it doesn't have to go to the CEO, right? But if it is coming from one of your counterparts to pick up the phone and actually have that phone conversation, I think that's the most safest way to handle it, right? The next thing is instead of actually clicking on a particular link, um, you may want to go to the actual original site, right?
Mhm.
So to give you an example, if a bank sends an email out like this saying, "Hey, now we have changed our website address, click here," right?
Mhm.
Instead of clicking on that click here button, you may want to go to the actual website that you're used to going to. Because 9 out of 10 times, if it's authentic, then there will be some sort of an indicator, some sort of a message from that company with maybe even an automatic routing to the new website, right? Um, or some instructions on what to do on their website. So always validate human to human validation. Human to human validation is the best, but if
Mhm.
not, then use your judgment. Make sure you're doing your due diligence on the internet before you actually click on something like that.
Right, for sure. I do understand and definitely urge you all to take that recommendation because it's very vital. But let's turn it back to your own organization and the audience, and definitely want you to ask yourself four questions. Visibility. How quickly would you or would we, which is your team, recognize suspicious activity? And then for identity, can we confidently verify who is accessing our systems? Your endpoints. Can we see the devices accessing company information? And what about the culture? Would employees confidently report something suspicious? So I want you to have these in the back of your mind while going through the rest of the webinar and later on afterwards, because as you know, at Blue Qubit Consulting, we're able to bring your business from a reactive to a resilient state. So as we jump in, I want to move on to how can we compare visibility and vulnerability and what the blind spot behind that looks like. So, what is limited visibility and the significant exposure? And then we're going to focus a little bit on those false sense of security. And what about alert fatigue? Rafiq, I want you to jump in and tell me a little bit more about why can business or why should business invest in security and still suffer from that alert fatigue? And what is alert fatigue? What's happening there?
Uh, uh, Thank you for this question. Uh, because those products may operate separately and produce duplicate or low value alerts. A small IT or security team may receive hundreds of notifications without enough time or you can say context to investigate them properly. When alerts from identity email endpoints and cloud application are not connected, the important warning can easily be buried under the noise. Security effectiveness should be not be measured by how many alerts are generated or convey or receive. It should be measured by how quickly the team can identify, investigate, and respond to a genuine threat without any noise.
Okay. And I see a question coming through. It can be for anyone on the panel. What is the average monetary value of a cyber attack? That's a very important question there. Anyone can jump in and let us know.
Ken, I can jump in there, right? It's very hard to tell sometimes exactly what that uh, average looks like. But what's been published is that across the world, on a global basis, um, the industry reports anywhere from 4.8 to $5 million across the board. Now, that is significantly higher for
Mm-hmm.
United States. For United States, almost every incident on average costs about $10 million. Now, once
Wow.
again, these are averages, obviously, right? And larger companies have a much larger impact. And when I talk about, when I say what's the average cost, that's not just ransomware, right? That someone may have to pay. I'm not talking specifically about ransomware. I'm talking about the downtime, the impact of the business if there's a data breach, right? In some instances, right, it can go beyond 10 million. But on average, in United States, it's been noted that it's about 10 million per incident.
Mm. That's a lot, and that put things into perspective because if you can see how this adds up in monetary value, this adds up over time, or even in just that one attack, it slows down so much. So what would you say Pharaoh's leaders should take away from today?
Look, from today's conversation, from a leadership perspective,
Hmm.
uh, I would say look at cybersecurity as risk management, right? Just like, you would have your disaster recovery plans in place, just as you would have incident response in place for something that may happen, right, at any time. Cybersecurity is no different. Cybersecurity, when you talk about it, it's not a matter of if it will happen.
Hmm.
It is when it will happen. Because uh, even if you don't know about it, it may actually be already happening. It's just that you don't know about it, right?
Right.
So it's not a if question, it is a when question. And in order to make sure that the business is not impacted when there is significant attack or damage to the business, the leadership team should be well prepared for handling minor incidents as well as major incidents that may take down their entire company.
Hmm. I totally agree with that for you. And Rafik, if you could just give us just one word that you think leaders should focus on in the back of their head. One word, it could be anything for cybersecurity. What would that word be?
Like leadership, leaders should be encourage their employees for the awareness, and for the like they can talk to them about if something is happening, and they should be more aware, and they focus on their awareness more in nowadays, because it's not only the handled the attack not only done through the endpoints, emails. It can be tricks a user in social engineering, and they can manipulate it with the, and they can share their credentials without their intentions.
Mhm. So while I thank you so much, while I open up for any questions, I do want to, in the meantime, let you know if it is that you think your organization is not prepared for getting having that visibility, or if an attack would happen today, you're not ready, you're not sure your team is, I want you to go ahead and ensure that you remove that blind spot by contacting us at Blue Qubit Consulting, so we can start with first an assessment of how your organization is currently and what best methods that we can use to bolster your cybersecurity. If you don't have any form of cybersecurity, you're not sure any training, that's okay. We will work with you from start to finish to get you to where you need to be, because we do scale with your businesses. And the quick way to get that consultation is to scan that QR code, so you can sign up for that one-on-one conversation. And remember, we want to help you answer the questions: where are we exposed, what matters the most, and what should we do next? I'm seeing two questions come up into the chat here, so let me jump over. While for those of you who may not have any questions, go ahead and scan. Where can I go to schedule an assessment for my company? So I pretty much just let you know that you can scan. You can even go to our website at bluequbitconsulting.com. There is a section to contact us and fill out that information as well, and we will connect you with the right member on the team and start your assessment right away. And when is your next session and what we will learn? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that into our next slide, but I do have a question I just want to pose to Rafiq. So if an organization says we already have an antivirus, firewall, and email security, so we're protected, what should you still want to investigate?
If they have a lot of tools, so but still they have some from my opinion, they are not still more protected, because there is a lot of false positive noise, and different tools make only noise. There are many industries tool nowadays. They are the one tool they can hand, the one tool, it can protect all the endpoints at the same time, and generates the cloud security, and protect endpoints, cloud security, cloud emails at the same time, and do not make any false positive noise. So visibility is very necessary for organization. If there is not visibility and only the false positive noise, then I cannot be confident that they are protected.
Right. And to Feroz, if your security team called you right now and said there was a credible incident, what information would you need from them to make a business decision?
Um, First and foremost, I would ask for what is the business impact, right? A credible threat could mean a lot of different things, right? And a credible threat could be something in a small, system in a small department to the HR system. And so, my first question once again would be, what is the impact of this credible attack? Based on that, then I would ask my incident response team to guide on what the leadership's next steps should be. So I'm assuming once again that we have an incident response procedure in place, and based on if it is a low, medium, high impact, the appropriate SOPs would be in place to take the necessary actions. So I would rely on a system that would have been put in place. When I say system, a business process that has been put in place to deal with an incident, rather than to be reacting, which is a lot what a lot of the companies do who are not prepared ahead of time.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I see two questions. I have two final questions here. One from the chat where it says, anyone can answer. Which industry is most vulnerable to cyber attacks?
I can once again take that one. Just based on some industry statistics that are out there, manufacturing and healthcare seem to face the most attacks. They're very frequent, and manufacturing companies encounter roughly about 2.7, 2.8% of overall global incidents right? And that number is significantly high if you think about it, right?
Mhm.
Um, it is more than one fourth of manufacturing companies around the world, right?
Oh,
Um, so yeah, manufacturing and health, I would say, are the two most that are most vulnerable.
yeah. And I can see why, because healthcare, a lot of information, a lot of personal information going through each and every day, and manufacturing. If you stop that process, the world kind of goes to a halt, depending on where you hit. And I have another question.
One other thought on that one, right? And when I say manufacturing and healthcare, right, I don't
Mhm.
necessarily mean just that company, because keep in mind that there's an ecosystem around these manufacturing and healthcare systems. There are providers and there
Right.
are suppliers, right?
Mhm.
There are customers. So when you look at the entire ecosystem of manufacturing and healthcare, that's where you see this huge spike in
Right.
attacks.
Hmm. Yes, I do understand. In the final question, I do have anyone can answer. If a business has a limited cybersecurity budget, where should it begin?
Let me answer it. Like it should begin by understanding its current exposure. So, like before buying another tool, identify the systems, accounts, devices, and data that are most important to the business. Then review the most likely risks and controls already in place. Some improvements may involve better configuration, a strong authentication, employee training, or clear response procedure. Then, rather than a large new investment. So the goal is to spend based on the risk and business impact, not simply by technology without knowing which problem it needs to solve.
And Karen, I can put my 2 cents in there too.
Sure.
From an executive perspective, once again, if you if you're going to invest in cybersecurity, right, you got to make sure that you're protecting all of the open doors. And not every company is going to have 50 open doors, right? So you have
Hmm.
to pick and choose and say, hey, what makes sense for your company? A lot of times people will talk about, should I be protecting, my network infrastructure, and should I be buying network infrastructure when they may not have anything in their company to maintain. Similarly, a lot of companies that are 100% on the cloud may not have a need to put cybersecurity in place for their server infrastructure or for their data closet, right? So, you kind of have to make that assessment and then figure out what is the right security posture for your company.
Right, both excellent responses, but I think the best response would be come to Blue Qubit Consulting, where we will start your journey. That is where you can have that audit assessment. We can show you the visibility, a lot of questions about what to do next. Don't worry about it. We will handle it and then let you know. We'll give you answers. We won't leave you with questions. We'll give you those answers to start your journey on cybersecurity. But that is all that we have for today. And I do want to say thank you, Feroz, for bringing that CEO's perspective, and Rafiq for taking us behind the technology. Both of you together gave us some really wonderful nuggets and what leaders should take away from today, and how to start that journey into building better resilience and a better strategy for cybersecurity. Thank you at home for tuning into this recording, and those who joined us in the audience today. What I do want to leave with you is the safest organizations aren't simply the ones with the highest walls. They're the ones that recognize the early warning signs and create that visibility that is needed. And a question was posed, what will be our next webinar? And we will have our next webinar on August 26th, which is next week, Wednesday. And it will be about cybersecurity isn't an IT problem. So we'll dive into what the true problem is, how can we address those issues, and just take it away to let you know that it is everyone in the organization's responsibility. But thank you so much for joining me today. Do enjoy the rest of your day, and please stay secure. Bye.
Thank you, Carrie Ann.
Thank you, Carry on. Bye.